All right, cool. And we are live. So I'm gonna start sharing just in a couple of platforms and whatnot.
Hmm.
All right, cool. Damian Slater, live and direct with pro wrestler. Link in the stories. So how's the food in over there?
The food.
Yeah.
Oh man. It's a pretty mixed bag. Like we have a very multicultural setup over here. Like I guess like a lot of places nowadays, but like you can get any type of food and it's all really good. It just kind of depends what you like, I guess. But where I am, I'm in Perth, Western Australia.
Western
We have
Australia.
what I think is a pretty good food culture over here. So like whatever you want, like you can find something that's really world class.
Uh-huh.
So I like it, man. I've been to a lot of countries, and I still think we have a really good food culture over here, especially coffee. The coffee culture here is wicked. That for me, that's
You love
number one.
coffee?
Really good coffee.
You love coffee? That's your thing?
Yeah, man. Yeah,
Oh, so you're
I
not
need it, man. I got a young daughter. I need all the caffeine I can get.
true, true, true. That's great. All right, let me share this on the other stories, and it should be good. Story. All right, all right, we're good
Rock and
to
roll.
go. Let's do it.
Great, man.
Let me do this for you. Actually, I'll send it to you if you want to share it to your friends and
Yeah, I just gave you a little share, so hopefully you get a few more eyes on what you're doing.
stuff. Normally, my audience is not up this early, but it's all good. All right.
No, you
So,
might get some new Australian fans. Who knows?
wow, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Although, like where we are in Perth, we're on the whole west side of Australia, so we're like 2 to 3 hours behind a lot of your major cities. So
Mm-hmm,
right now it's probably pretty late even for Australians.
mm-hmm.
But we're in line with Japan, so you might get that,
Oh,
like that Southeast Asian
that's
fan
cool.
base.
So I just want to get to know you a little bit before we talk about your wisdom in pro wrestling. When did you
Sure
get
thing.
started? How did you get started? When did you become
Uh, I,
like a wrestling fan?
yeah, yeah, of course. So I started watching in the Attitude Era,
Oh,
because everyone was watching back then. So 1999 is when I first started watching. Over here we had WWF was on like late night TV, 6 months delayed,
yeah.
and I just remember like all the kids in school just obsessed with wrestling. I had no idea what it was,
Uh,
but just through wanting to fit in, I started to watch it and instantly connected with what it was. I was always a big fan of martial arts, of sports, of real legitimate, legitimate type sports and things like that. And for whatever reason, I remember tuning in. I saw The Undertaker. He was in the Ministry of Darkness, all those supernatural themes, and I was just enamored by it. So yeah, from that day onwards, obsessed wrestling fan. Started training in 2002 at a place called the Monster Factory in Adelaide, South Australia, which is where I grew up. And it was the only place in all of South Australia, in the entire state, where you could learn pro wrestling. There really wasn't a whole lot in Australia back then. So I was 15. I was pretty young, and these days most places won't accept you unless you're like 16 to 18. But back then it was the Wild West. Anyone could train at pretty much any age. So yeah, 15 is when I got started, 2002, and I've just hit 20 years as a pro wrestler.
Who took you in when you were 15? Who was your trainer, or did you just go in and knock on the door, or did you like look at a phone book, or was there a commercial, like an old school commercial? You want to be a pro wrestler? Well, come here in this Monster Factory. Like, who was your connects?
Yeah. No, I don't think they could afford commercials on TV. Like, they were probably just too expensive for how much money they had. So it was all just word of mouth. Like, I was super lucky. My dad used to coach rugby, so he had a rugby team, and one of his students, one of his players, ended up becoming a pro wrestler. So my dad heard about that. He knew that I watched wrestling, so he said, "Hey, one of my players actually wrestles. Let's go watch him." And my dad took me to a show. I was 11 years old, and I think the promotion had only maybe run like 3 shows. That they were pretty new. And there hadn't been any wrestling in my hometown for years. This was like the revival of pro wrestling. It had been gone since the 80s. And they had this old timer. His name was Cole Devani. He ended up becoming my trainer. He would have been in his 70s when he was training me.
Yeah.
And he basically got pulled out of retirement to start up this school. I believe it was to train. This one kid wanted to learn how to wrestle, and they heard about this old timer who lived in their town. So they convinced him to come out of retirement, train him up, and they contacted a lot of like backyard wrestlers in the area and just anyone who wanted to join, and they started this school. So by the time I started watching, they were maybe 1 year into existence, and we went to this show. And like I said, this is the Wild West. This is the late 90s.
Yeah.
My dad's student had a neo-Nazi gimmick, right? So and this was like fully accepted. So, and I was 11. I didn't know history or anything.
Yeah.
And I remember going to this show, and he was the biggest babyface, the biggest hero in the company.
Yeah. And
full neo-Nazi character. But it wasn't until years later that I thought about it, and I was like, man, that's insane. Like, what kind of time were we living in?
That's like, that's like very Attitude Era-ish, just to get it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I went and watched those shows. I'd go every month, bring my little signs, and then
that's cool.
I always obviously wanted to do it, but I was too young. The training school was, like a 40-minute drive from my house, and I was obviously underage.
Yeah.
So eventually, when I turned 15, I got the okay from the parents, and I just went down, knocked on the door, and said, I'm here for training, and they let me in. They beat the hell out of me.
You must have been very passionate, because for your parents to get your approval is like, okay,
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd done a little bit before that. When I turned 13, I got told no. My parents said, no, you can't train. This place is, it was in a pretty rough area, the training school.
Yeah.
So like the little like suburb or town that it was in didn't have a good reputation. So as soon as I said, "Hey, I want to go train over here," they were like, "No way! There's no way you're getting on a bus or
Mm.
getting on a train or going there." But then there was another place that opened up, which eventually found out it was basically just backyard wrestling in a ring.
Uh-huh.
But it was closer to home, so they said, "Yeah, you can go there. That's a safe little part of town. You can go there." So for about a year and a half, I was learning how to wrestle in a ring with guys who had zero experience.
So you were
Uh,
so you were kind of a little experienced. Like, hey, I'll teach you stuff, and you teach me stuff, or
barely. But I thought these guys were like, the be all and end all. I thought they were fantastic. It
yeah.
wasn't until I went to an actual pro wrestling school that I realized they didn't actually have any formal training. But I think just because I'd been around that for a couple of years, didn't have any injuries, everything was pretty
Like,
sweet.
knock on
Then
wood.
my parents were cool with me, doing the professional stuff and learning in that way.
Okay. That's that's really interesting because I interviewed a couple of people from the U.S. and whatnot, and with I don't know if they have it where you're at, but in order to be a professional wrestler back in that like 1990s or early 2000s and whatnot, you had like the only way that you could wrestle is if you have a license saying that you are a professional wrestler. Caval, Loki,
Yeah, yeah.
that like there's a reason why he called him the professional because he's one of those generations where he has a legit professional wrestling license. And I was like,
It's funny you say that. I actually still have my Nevada pro wrestling license
oh yeah,
from
yeah,
2007 when I was in Vegas wrestling over there.
yeah,
It's like a little piece of cardboard that says you're a
yeah.
wrestler.
I didn't know that was a
I
thing, and
remember,
I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, no, we don't have anything like that. Like, there's no commissions over here. It's not regulated at all. It's just whoever has some money and wants to buy a ring and hire out a venue, you can run a show. So yeah, there's zero regulation over here. But yeah, when I went over there, I was shocked because I got there and they were like, "Have you got your wrestling license?" And I thought they were having me on.
What?
Like, you need a license to wrestle. They're like, yeah, you need to get checked by the doctor. They need to do a little health
Yeah.
check. And it was like, honestly, it was like 2 minutes. Have you had any injuries?
Mhm.
No. All right, bend over, touch your toes. Yeah, you're good. There you go. It
So
didn't take, and I think it was like $20. You had to pay $20. The
yeah,
promotion paid for it.
yeah.
I don't know if they still do that, but
I don't think so. I
yeah.
don't think so anymore. But you know what? That'd be
Uh,
pretty cool too. Just to have like, yeah, I'm a professional. Like,
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, it makes you feel like a real pro. So that's cool.
especially that old school days. Like, yeah, I'm old school. I still got this. So
Hell yeah. Yeah.
it's like keeping a library card, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Very good.
I found something. I learned something about you. You love martial arts. Are you into the old school films?
Yeah, yeah. Like even before I was a pro wrestling fan, some of my favorite films were Jean-Claude Van Damme films. I
Oh
was
yeah,
into
Van Damme.
Bloodsport and Kickboxer and Karate Kid is basically my first love. I think I watched
Really?
I was like 2 or 3 years old,
You're a
and that got
you
me into karate. So that was the first martial art I trained in. I did 3 or 4 years of karate.
hmm
But I think looking back, I always loved that whole like tournament style. Who's the best of the best. There's something about that I always really loved, and it's only like recently when I've thought about it, like what kind of brought me to wrestling. I always thought it was just seeing it on TV, but when I think about it, I think it comes back to my love of martial arts, of
Yeah.
karate, of Karate Kid,
You watch Cobra
because
Kai?
yeah, absolutely.
Oh
The
yeah.
the, the first the first wrestling pay-per-view I ever watched was Survivor Series '98, and
Oh
uh,
sweet.
and that was a big 16 man or 32 man. I think it was 16 man tournament,
Yeah.
and that was the first pay-per-view I watched start to finish. So yeah, that I think that rings true. I think a lot of my martial arts background helped me with wrestling.
I'm a big I'm even before wrestling, I was into a huge martial arts, kung fu, flicks, everything. I used to watch because I used to work at a video store, and I would
Yeah.
like watch a lot of kung fu flicks, like Yuan Biao, Sammo Hyung, like flicks. And thanks to the guy who ran the video store when I was 13, next to the martial arts flicks were a bunch of old school, like FMW, Old Japan,
Yeah, yeah.
like videotapes. So all my friends were into the whole WWF stuff, while here I am with a bunch of libraries of like kung fu flicks and old school Japanese wrestling and all that stuff, and I was like, one by one by one by one, I was just like
Yeah, that's
picking
sick.
it, and I'm like, this is great. Um,
That's awesome,
do
man.
you like you're into Van Damme and whatnot? So like, are you excited for, like when you saw like Expendables, where you were like, oh, this how it's supposed to be? Like, because back then it was all about '90s like buff and
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah,
when
yeah.
the movies Expendables came out, were you like, oh, this is dope? Like, this how action's supposed to be? Like,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like all those guys, man. Like any Stallone movie, any Arnie movie, I was into all of it. Uh, I think in time that kind of evolved, that love of
yeah,
that kind of film genre. It evolved a little bit. So I'm actually not into action films at all anymore.
yeah.
But I think as a kid, that really I loved it. Anything action related,
Hmm.
explosions, fight scenes, all that kind of stuff, man. I loved all of it. But yeah, no, these days I'm a bit softer, man. I'm into the the rom coms and
Oh yeah, what's your favorite rom com? I'm curious.
no, not really. My wife makes me watch them, but
All right, so
I don't mind a Love Actually. Love Actually is where I
Love
kind
Actually
of
is pretty good.
that's a good
Hugh
film.
Grant, it's a good one.
Yeah.
So, when was like your were you scared when you did your very first wrestling match? Like the
Oh
the
yeah,
jitters.
yeah. Terrified, man. I remember funny story. My first actual debut, which will never go on record as an official debut, was when I was doing the back. I guess you call it backyard wrestling. We had a venue, we had a ring, there was
Hmm.
a crowd,
That's
but we
good.
were untrained. But my first show, I was 13. I think there was about 350 people. It was a kickboxing exhibition night, and they
Oh,
put wrestling on as like the sideshow, like
sideshow.
intermission entertainment.
Yeah,
So I was wrestling in a kickboxing ring at 13 years old in front of 350 people or something insane.
yeah.
Uh, and that was terrifying. But my actual pro wrestling debut, I still remember getting backstage afterwards and I couldnn't remember a thing that happened. Like I was just
Yeah.
so tunnel vision
How long was the
in the
match?
moment.
Like, was it like
Yeah,
10 minutes, 5 minutes? Like, how long was the
uh,
match? Do you remember?
it would have been about 10 minutes.
Oh, okay.
It was like a they at the time I was 15 and
Yeah.
two of my training partners were also 14 or 15,
Okay.
and it was kind of like a trainee exhibition. So we'd been training for about 8 months, and nowadays 8 months is nothing. Like most people train for a year or two over here anyway before they debut, but back
Yeah.
then there wasn't a lot of wrestlers, so people generally got put on shows a lot earlier.
Okay.
And we'd been training, but they just said, you guys are too young. Like, we can't put you out there. You're too young. You're too young.
Yeah.
And we were working so hard. And I thought we built up a pretty good skill level pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of forced their hand and they said, all right, we're going to put you in like a rookie three-way trainee match. I think we rehearsed the match start to finish for like 2 months, which is just again even back then was unheard of. Everything
Yeah.
was on the fly. It was very old school. But
Yeah.
they said, all right, we don't trust you guys. You guys have to make this match good. Otherwise, we're gonna get all the blame,
Mm-hmm.
this and that. So yeah, we went out there, had what was a pretty good match for debuts for trainees. But I don't remember a thing of it. We got backstage and it was just like, what just happened? That was insane. Just a complete rush, start to finish. Yeah, it took me a while to come back down to earth after that one.
There's no footage of that at all, right? Nobody recorded it.
I had like the old VHS
Oh, okay.
tape somewhere. I wouldn't have a clue where it is now.
Oh
Yeah, like
man,
there was probably about 3 years of my career where it was all on old tapes.
that's
We
great.
didn't get DVD for a few years.
That's great. Oh man, just hearing VHS and all that stuff, like that's. All right. So you had your first match, well, your debut match. But what was you think like the match that legit put you like where you are like right now? Like what was the match like? Was it like a legit promotion or you did you somewhat get called
Um,
up to like a other promotion, a well known one, or like, hey, that's Damian
so
Slater, like, you know?
everything's been a slow build over 20 years. Like I can't say there's any one match that uh it got me seen. Everything was I started off in my hometown. You know, after a couple of years, I started to do bigger shows and they got me noticed to go to other states, other cities, get flown around Australia. You know, Australia is a very big country. You
Yeah,
can't really
yeah.
drive city to city. You have to
Nah,
fly.
yeah.
And then that got me the opportunities overseas and internationally. Um, the biggest one, I have to say, the WWE Cruiserweight Classic when I wrestled Tajiri first round,
Yeah.
that's the big one because that still has a lasting effect to this day. And now it's been, I think, 7 years just gone since we ran that tournament.
Yeah.
At that point, I wouldn't say I was well known, and I wouldn't say I was well known after it,
Hmm.
but it got me a lot more booking opportunities. So from doing that,
Hmm.
as soon as I came home, it was suddenly okay. I'm getting flown around the country, and you can, you know, anytime someone would promote me for their show, even to this day, people still mention the Cruiserweight Classic, even though it was 7 years ago. It was
Yeah.
one match,
Yeah.
but just for that longevity of people still bringing it up, I would say that that's the one that kind of got me noticed. But yeah, I would say that there's so many other matches that I would say were great matches that got me other opportunities that you would have never heard of.
That's cool.
But that would be the big one.
Can you tell me a couple of them?
Yeah, yeah. So I found that over here I wrestled. Actually, it was in Adelaide. It wasn't in Perth. In Adelaide, I wrestled Ikuto Hidaka. He was my one of my coaches in Japan for 0-1. So I
Okay.
spent a few months training over there, and I came back, and then I wrestled him after that in Adelaide. And that one started to get that got spoken about quite a bit because I think that was probably the first time where I was really able to show my technical style in full, and that the submission grappling style is something I've always loved, but not a lot of people over here do that style.
So it makes you
So I
stand
found,
out a little bit, technically, right?
yeah, absolutely, and Hidaka's honestly, for my book, the most underrated junior heavyweight of all time.
Yeah.
Master of every style, particularly grappling, phenomenal. So to be able to come here, we were able to show, I think we had quite a large crowd. We were in a bit of a small kind of stadium. I think we had about 800 people or so. So for Australia, that was a big audience. And we wrestled just this pure chain wrestling, hold for hold grappling match,
Nice.
which a lot of our crowds had zero experience with. Very risky move,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it was super well received after that. And that helped me kind of get other opportunities around Australia and overseas from there. So that would be another one that stands out for me for sure.
I'm a
Uh,
big like Shibata,
yeah,
Kurt
man.
Angle, like catch him grapple chain. Like I love that. Like a lot of people,
Yeah,
love the flips and all that stuff. I used to back in the day, but
sure.
when I saw Shibata versus Okada at Sakura Genesis 2017, I'm like, I understood what was happening. I'm like, this is really good, you know.
Yeah,
So hearing you
yeah.
say that, like grapple and submission, like Zack Saber chain wrestling type, I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
like I respect
I
that.
truly believe that
Yeah.
any style can be appreciated by pretty much any audience if you do it in the right way and you make it make sense. And
Mm-hmm.
like for the longest time, I think a lot of people had the perception in terms of wrestlers over here in Australia that crowds don't care for chain wrestling, for hold, for technical wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
And in a lot of ways that was true, but it was because they weren't educated on it. And I
Yeah.
feel like if you can do it well, if you can do anything really well and make it believable and legitimate, people are going to get behind it, whether they understand it or not. They're going to feel your pain. They're going to see the emotion on your face. That's what made me fall in love with Japanese wrestling. Was
Mm-hmm.
Japanese wrestling is all about the battle. It's all about the fight,
Yeah.
and everything is that, that man versus man or woman versus woman
Mm-hmm.
going head to head in the ring. It's not about the promos or the storylines or the
Yeah.
hype packages.
No, it's all about just the
And
in ring. Granted,
that's it, man.
granted
It's the drama.
yeah.
Yeah.
Granted, it takes
It's
like 20, 25 minutes or 30 minutes to tell the story. Like, it's like, okay, they're building up and all that stuff. Yeah.
absolutely,
Totally get
absolutely.
it.
So I think if you can do that well, you can make any skeptic, any casual fan appreciate what you're doing.
So I got a question. You wrestled a lot of international guys. So when I'm watching, right, in my head it's like, is there I know pro wrestling and the wrestling has its own communication and whatnot, but the language barrier, is that a struggle, or you know what your guys are doing, or they know some English, they understand, but is there like a secret communication where you're calling us stuff in the ring, or like is the language barrier like, because clearly when I'm watching, like, wow, like these guys are going at it, and they're understanding, they're protecting each other. So I'm always curious about that. So like when you wrestle Tajiri, I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
Tajiri's English is pretty good, but right, or like was there any
Who's
communication?
to know?
Like how do you communicate with your opponent who does that have that language barrier? Like how do you do that? Like I'm always curious.
Yeah. Look, there is a language barrier, particularly with the Japanese talent, and I've from being over there and wrestling over here, I've had a lot of experience with Japanese wrestlers. There is a language barrier, but I found they all speak good enough English to get by,
Yeah.
particularly wrestling English. So wrestling English, the names of moves,
Mm-hmm.
even little things like being able to use your body language to communicate. You don't always have to communicate in the ring. From experience and from knowing how to wrestle, knowing how to actually grapple,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of Japanese wrestling is very grapple heavy. You
There's
don't
that,
need to
yeah.
talk to your opponent. You can just go out there and wrestle, because you know how they're moving, you know where they want you to be, they know where you want them to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of non-verbal communication in pro wrestling, and they do it fantastically. And anyone who has been trained in the right way should know how to do it well. But at the same time, they all speak enough English. Some better than others, absolutely, but enough to get by, definitely.
When I found out, because what you call it, my girlfriend, she met Tanahashi. I think it was last weekend, I believe, because he was at House of Glory, and she was amazed by how perfect his English is, and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like I'm like, oh. Like,
Yeah.
damn, you could have got me like a promo or something, or like a shout out, But I was amazed, but so clearly, like, cause are you the type of person who calls it in the ring, or do you like to rehearse a little bit before your match? Like, okay, we should do this, or not, or there's some people who say, oh, no, let's just call it in the ring, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, it kind of depends on what the show is and who I'm against. I think what I've found is nowadays everyone is pretty similar. Like when I first started, my trainer was very old school, so there wasn't really any planning. It was all calling in the ring. Everything was just wrestle, just go out there and wrestle. So you got really good at that. You got really comfortable with not having anything in mind and just seeing what happens. Nowadays, I found that pretty much everyone I've ever wrestled, doesn't matter which country they're from, how big a name they are, how new they are to wrestling, they're all very similar in that they plan anything from some of the match to all of the match. I've very rarely gotten in the ring with anyone over the last 10 years who said, let's just call it out there. That very rarely happens.
It's an old school mentality, must be, I guess. It must be very old school to call it in the ring.
Yeah, for sure. But, some people like to plan start to finish. But if you look back, Randy Savage always had a reputation as being someone who planned start to finish.
He writes it.
And this was when everyone was calling on the fly, but he was different. But nowadays it is going more one way. And I think a lot of that is how complex wrestling is getting. It's not like it used to be where everyone kind of did the same moves. You would have your signature moves, but we're all, particularly where I was growing up, we all did the body slam, the suplex, the hip toss, the arm drag. We had our like 5 moves of doom and we did all of them. So you kind of knew what was happening. Nowadays, things are so complex and there's you look at like a high spot in wrestling and how quick it is nowadays and the amount of movement that goes into it. There's a bit more cooperation than usual. So you kind of need to be on that same page. So things may need to be hashed out a little bit ahead of time. You can't really just call things on the fly because your opponent may have no idea what you're talking about. It's definitely changed a little bit. Mm-hmm. I find though that when I'm in a situation that is a little less stressful, perhaps less eyes on the show that I'm on, perhaps less restrictions where I'm not being told, hey, you have to go 6 minutes 30 and we need this and this and this and this. Sometimes you go and they just say, hey, wrestle for as long as you want, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And when that happens, usually I'm thinking, all right, let's just call it out there and have more fun with it. Let's just stay casual. Because I still like to get that practice in. And sometimes it's really fun not having things to remember and not being stressed out about this, having to do this and this and this. I like just being able to go with the flow sometimes. So it depends. Everywhere's different.
Who was the producer for the Cruiserweight Classic? They say, hey, you and Tajiri, like 15 minutes. Here's what you're supposed to do. Like, how did that go?
So our producer was Cesaro, Claudio Castagnoli.
Okay.
He was one of the agents. I think there was 4 agents. There was Cesaro, Funaki, Sarah Del Rey, and Matt Bloom, who used to wrestle with Albert. He, head coach of the Performance Center. Yeah. There may have been one more. I think Norman Smiley. So 4 or 5 agents, and they all got delegated. So I had Cesaro, which was really cool because we had actually wrestled a few years prior in Australia.
Did he remember you?
Yeah, definitely. And it was cool because I think because he was a wrestler at the time, I think he was injured, so he was doing some extra work helping us out. But because he was a wrestler at the time, it was good to pick his brain as someone who is currently on main roster at the time. But he was the one. When we first got there, it was more just like a big lineup. We all lined up together. They called out the matchups.
That's cool.
Briefly told us what they wanted, but we were actually quite free to do as we wanted. We weren't given that many restrictions. It wasn't like, even though it's a TV product.
Yeah, that's
it wasn't like a live. It wasn't like a live Raw or SmackDown where you're given very specific instructions and there's ad breaks and you have to hit this time perfectly. We were given a fairly strict time of what they wanted, but that was it. The rest was do what brought you here, do what got you recognized.
Wow.
And that was it.
So they just gave you time. Hey, 15 minutes, boom, have fun.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here you go. I think we went 5 minutes 30 or 6 minutes in our match, but we were actually given 10, which also includes entrances and exits and all the rest. It's like a whole package.
Yeah.
But we actually went under time. So I was quite shocked when they told me I was wrestling Tajiri, I thought, okay, like this is great. This is fantastic because he was probably the biggest name in the tournament at the time. He had done the most in his career.
Yeah.
But I thought, okay, no name Australian against Tajiri. I'm going to get like 45 seconds and that's it.
You know
So then when
what's
they said minutes, that was actually one of the highest, the longest times out of everyone in that first round.
yeah.
I think there was only a couple of other matches that had longer time than we did.
Hmm.
So that was pretty cool. We ended up going under anyway, but yeah, that was really cool. We had quite a lot of freedom. And when I got together with Tajiri, again, here's me thinking, okay, I know the deal. Tarantula, elbow, kick in the head, I'm done. He wanted to do everything that I wanted to do. He wanted to make me look amazing. He let me do everything I wanted. Yeah, just
That's
incredible experience.
that's really
Did not
cool.
expect
So this is where we're gonna talk to the wise now, and this is the reason why I brought you in. The pro wrestling hierarchy. It was the while you're here wrestling, then comes promotion, then comes the what is it? The wrestler.
the
Then
event that you're
the
on,
yeah, promotion event, then the wrestler, right?
then the match,
The match, then the wrestler. Last is
and
yourself.
yeah, last is yourself.
Yeah, okay.
So it goes basically like industry, which you could take that or leave it. I think it's a bit irrelevant.
You know, I'm gonna
Uh,
write this down because
but yeah, you got your industry, you got your promotion, you got your event, you've got your match, you've got your opponent, then you've got yourself. So this is something that I'd learned it through different people over many years. Like a lot of things you learn for yourself, you figure it out yourself. This was something that I would hear it in different places, input in different ways. And then the promoter of Melbourne City Wrestling, his name's Jay Andrews.
Mhm.
He's a promoter slash head trainer. He put it into words. He put it exactly as I just said it, and that really stuck with me because it's something I'd heard so many times, but never really thought of it as an actual concept or an actual package. But essentially, it's just about what's the most important thing when it comes to anything in wrestling, when it comes to any decision you make,
Mhm.
when it comes to the way you put your matches together, the character ideas that you pitch to bookers. And it's just making sure that you aren't being selfish because selfishness is very easy in pro wrestling. Pro wrestling is subjective. It's not about how many wins you get. It's not about beating up the toughest guy on the roster. It's about impressing people.
Mhm.
So it's very easy to be selfish. But the problem with being selfish is it doesn't really serve anyone but yourself. So when it comes to things like a promotion who wants to go in a certain direction and perhaps every promotion has a feel. They have a vibe, something they want to come across as.
Like a theme
You
or
look at
something that stands out. Like they want to stand
yeah,
out.
they want to stand out in a certain way. They want to fill a
Yeah.
certain niche. You look at a company like PWG in
Yeah.
California, a company that's always, at least over the more recent years, has always prided itself on being a promotion full of supercards, dream matches. It's all about every match stealing the show, being the most amazing match possible. Every high spot under the sun, everything you can think of on these individual shows. Other companies, and most other companies, they don't go that way. They think of their shows as total packages. So if you're wrestling on the second match on the card and you have 6 minutes to get your match over and done with, well, the promoter probably wouldn't appreciate if you go out there and you do every high spot, every dive, you pull out weapons, and now the main event has nothing to work with because
Yeah.
most promotions work towards that climax in the main event. So this is where it comes back to the hierarchy and thinking, okay, I'm putting this match together. Let's think about the promotion and the event first. What's going to help the event? What's going to suit the event? Okay, it's going to suit the event if we have a more character-driven match. Or, hey, no one on this show is having a technical grappling match. Let's go that way.
Yeah.
And then, you go further down, the reason why you put your opponent over yourself and this is a very old school thought, but it's a true thought. If you can make your opponent look $1 million and they can make you look $1 million, you're going to have a better match. If
Yeah.
you're only looking out for yourself, things don't tend to click. So it's all about make sure that you get your opponent over. Make sure that they look amazing, that they are standing out, that they're getting their character across, they're getting their point across. And if they do the same for you, we're going to have a good time.
That's true. Yeah, that is very true. It's funny because so I don't know if you know there's a community in wrestling called the Caw community, where it's basically it's like a couple of it's a community where we use the WWE2K game and we legit create a promotion and we signed the community creation cause that the community creates, you know. And I run a promotion called Xtreme Virtual Pro Wrestling, and huge production of like um, granted we are not real wrestlers, but we create our cause in the game and we create these amazing matches using highlight reel, where it's basically like you play with two controllers and whatnot, and you create a really good match out of it, and you're able to pick the camera angle so it does not look like it. Yeah, it looks like a video game, but the fact that you're producing a match and whatnot to make it look like a legitimate match. So then,
Yeah, sure.
the fact that there's a community behind it, it's huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's still
Well,
getting
it's like
yeah.
I guess it's like like what when I was first getting into wrestling, what used to be big on the internet was e-feds
Yes,
like
that's what. Yes,
yeah,
exactly like that.
essentially.
Yeah. So
Video games weren't very complex back then, so you
yeah,
couldn't really fantasy book on your
yeah.
WCW Revenge.
Hmm.
But yeah, no, I get exactly what you mean. So
Yeah.
so
So
yeah,
the
take that kind of fantasy booker,
uh-huh.
but taking it one step further with the
Yeah.
whole
So it's a
package.
little bit more. It's a little bit more. I guess advanced now, because
Yeah,
now we're the ones legit creating the map. Like there's the eFed part now because it's AI versus AI and all, but now the
yeah,
fact that you have these guys who are very knowledgeable and able to produce these 5-star class. I mean, if Dave Meltzer comes out and say, "What the hell is this?" He'll give it 5 stars already because it's so like wow. So picking your brain and whatnot, I'm like that. Like I worry about this first, then this, then this. You
yeah.
know, listening to all these podcasts, I'm like, and in my head, I'm like, I'm actually doing that with that mentality, but I just need to pick somebody's brain to say that I'm not going crazy because what you're saying is
Yeah.
absolutely true. Because I worry about putting my opponent over, so when I'm doing the game, like I gotta make sure this guy gets his shit in. Like I'm putting him over, but I gotta
Yeah.
find my way to put myself over too. Cause yeah, I'm making this guy look
Yeah.
like $1 million. So it totally
The funny
makes
thing
sense.
is, a lot of this and a lot of on my social media, I put a lot of coaching tips and I film parts of our training sessions and this and that. A lot of it is common sense. It really is. It's
Yeah.
logic. A lot of people know it already, but until someone actually frames it for you in a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it doesn't fully connect. So you might do it already or you might think it already,
Mm-hmm.
but I find, and this is what helped me when I would go to different places and different countries, and I would always make sure to train in those places. They would tell me things, and I'm like, yeah, I do that. I already do that. But the fact that they put it into words
Yeah.
made it really stick in my mind. So
Yeah.
now every time I do that, I'm kind of going back and thinking, yeah, I remember when they told me that that's what I should be doing. And I feel like that really helps kind of, nail down your own philosophy in pro wrestling.
So you're a coach, and I respect that because I like as a dancer who teaches back in the day, especially with the kids and all that stuff. Because I'm a b-boy, I'm a break dancer, you know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I was teaching a lot. How do you deal with the egos? Because pro wrestling
yeah.
itself has a lot of egos, right?
Sure,
So
sure.
how do you handle that, or what's your word of advice of people who have those top egos?
Uh, I don't think I've had a lot of. I haven't had to deal with egos a lot from a training perspective, because I find that generally the ones with the egos don't show up to training, because training is where you get sorted out. Like, if you can't put in the work and you can't prove yourself, you get exposed very quickly. Particularly, I run the I guess it's the advanced class at our school.
Mm-hmm.
We have a different name for it. We call it the pro class, but
Okay.
we have the guys who have been around for a few years and they've been wrestling for a while. So, there's always that level of ego. I think everyone in wrestling has a certain level of ego, but the ones that can't contain that ego, they expose themselves. I don't really need to do anything. They generally don't come back,
Yeah.
or they don't come back very often. And if they do, then when the promoter doesn't book them on shows and when they're not really getting opportunities, again, they expose themselves. So I don't really, I haven't really had to like deal with it too much. If I did, I'd just make them work harder and make them work harder and harder and harder, and make them put, I feel like the harder you work, the more your ego gets settled. Like when it comes to, I'll put it in a jujitsu sense, because jujitsu is what I spend a lot of my time doing. And most of my training is nowadays is in submission grappling. We
Okay.
get beaten up, man. Like,
Yeah,
we
yeah,
get choked and humbled very easily. As soon as you're facing someone more experienced, they humble you, and
yeah.
it's hard to have an ego when you're getting beaten up. So that's
That's
my
very
philosophy for
true.
our training as well. If you got an ego, I'm gonna make you work harder until you become humble.
I when I was in break when I was practicing with my back then I was not with my dance crew. I was training to earn my place to get into that dance crew, but I was like, yo, I'm ready to be I'm ready to be an NBK, and then I'm like, oh yeah, like do you really So I'm like, yeah, I know I got it. So all right, battle this person. And I tell you, I was not ready. And this probably like 3 years, like training, battling, and I'm just like,
Yeah,
damn, I got put in my place like that, and I'm like, fuck, like, all right,
yeah.
try to train some more, to earn that spot.
Hey, look,
Yeah,
it's good. It's good to have confidence. I think
it
confidence
is.
helps
It really
in
is.
every industry. You've got to be confident in what you're doing, and I think it's good to have that chip on your shoulder sometimes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you got to prove it. And if you can't prove it, then sometimes you just got to admit defeat and back to the drawing board for sure.
So I'm in a little dilemma, a little bit, and I'm pretty sure you can probably help me out with this. So they always say that the title is, if you're not working for the title, then you should not be in a promotion and all that stuff. I'm like, okay, I told you guys that you want to be the person who holds the championship, right? So, but as a person who also runs a promotion, which is my promotion, Xtreme Virtual Pro Wrestling, I always care about the story, right? The story of the person getting like, okay, if I have so and so this person and whatnot, all right, I'm worried. I'm more concerned about the story than probably the people involved in the story, you know? So let's say if a person say, hey, like, is it my chance to get the title? Can I get the title? Or that's the reason why you wanted me. So how do you I'm in a dilemma, like, damn, like, well, I see this person working hard, but this tells the better story. So but then this person wants the title. So I'm just like, okay. So like I said, you have your industry, right? So I'm just okay. When does If I really care about the story, should a person come up to me and say, hey, like, I know you got this story coming up and whatnot, but is there a way that you can you put me in that title picture storyline? Or how do you help me out here, Damian?
No,
You understand what I
you're
mean?
right.
You understand what I'm
It
saying
really comes
about?
back to the hierarchy. From an individual sense, it's whatever the promotion needs. That's number one. What does the promotion need moving forward when it
Mm-hmm.
comes to long-term storylines, when it comes to every company is different. Some promotions have a lot of emphasis on championships
Mm-hmm.
and on rankings and on building your way up the ladder and this and that. Other companies a little bit more story heavy, and some companies have both. I think that the title can either make the wrestler or the wrestler can make the title, and it just depends on how you want to go about it. So I've not anymore, but I used to do a lot of booking for a couple of different local companies.
Yeah.
And I found that sometimes you had a main event scene that was a little bit lacking, and a way to boost people up to the main event was to put a title on them or give them opportunities at that high level.
Mm-hmm.
And once they've had a bit of time up there, then they will become a main event talent, or they will be seen in a different light. And then other times it was more about, our main event scene's a little bit stale. The title doesn't have a big feel about it. We haven't had a lot of big title matches and a lot of drama involved. Let's put the title on our most experienced, most over guy or girl,
Mm-hmm.
and then they can lift the importance of that title for a while, and then we can go back to square one and use that championship to put others over. So again, it comes down to what you want as a promotion. I think that should be first and foremost. For me, the championship is a prop. It's a prop that helps your promotion. It gives you reasons for storylines. You can have storylines that revolve around the title, or that
Mm-hmm.
start revolved around the title and then break off in a different direction.
Yeah, it's funny because
But
I
it's
said
what
that
you want.
before. I said that before. It's like this championship is just a prop, man, and that's funny because you said it. I'm like, like I know what I'm getting at. Is this? It's so funny. You said it perfectly. Like the title is just a prop. Like, come on,
It
guys.
is. It
Like I
is. It
care
is.
more
It's a,
about the
it's a
story.
prop to help you.
Yeah, I
Yep.
care about the story
Yep.
more. Like a person
Yep.
can
For
be
sure.
over, but sometimes the guy holding the championship is not really over. We just gave you a prop. It's so fucking true. Oh my god, you're great.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm happy. I'm happy. I saw your stories, bro. Cause
I want to know how did you see the stories? That's what I'm interested, because I've been putting content out for like 5 or 6 years, like mostly YouTube stuff. It's probably only in the last month that I've gotten onto
it
Instagram a little bit
was
heavier with that
so
kind of stuff. But
so it's funny because in Caw, Create a Wrestler,
yeah,
like guys, there's it's so funny. Like think of it like a catfish type of way. Is like, okay, I'm gonna put my Caw up. It's a picture of the WWE2K Caw, and they make an IG,
yeah,
and similar to pro wrestlers, they upload
yeah,
their
yeah,
matches and shit like that.
yeah,
Promotions, like how I'm talking to you right now, XVPW, it's my Caw promotion, so I will post my content up and all that stuff.
yeah.
I saw you on a searches, so it was like the little search bar, and you're just scrolling up, finding content. So I of course I follow a lot of pro wrestling and whatnot, and that's where I saw you. I was like, oh,
Right, gotcha.
so
Yeah,
I
cool.
was like, oh, follow because I like what this guy's saying. He's giving little seminars because I can't, I'm not really like I got so outside of my XVPW, I really want to get to learn the ins and outs. I really want to get into the business so I can understand
Sure.
more. So whatever I learned from whatever promotion that I was taking pictures for, I would
Yeah,
implement it in XVPW. So
yeah,
so I started off as a regular photographer because I had so much gear, like I had DSLRs and whatnot. I'm like, there's more to this than me just doing my Caw promotion. So
hmm,
I got into capital wrestling. I got into pro wrestling magic. I did stuff for Evolve and HOG. So I was there as a photographer.
cool,
Then from
great.
there, as a photographer, I was able to go into the back, and that's where I learned about gorilla position, calling
Yeah,
matches, seeing the time
yeah,
cards and whatnot. So then I was like, oh, I wish I can go to these seminars, but of course I have a 9 to 5. So then I learned about stuff from you. I'm like, oh, this
yeah.
guy is great. Like, so
Cool, man. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Good to hear. That's great, man. Because
yeah.
yeah,
Your content
for the
helps out a
longest
lot,
time,
man. Yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. I've got, I'm going to keep putting stuff out online. I've got a lot more in the works. So
Yeah.
it's good that it's spreading beyond Australia because for the longest time, within Australia, within as a coach and pro wrestler and trainer and that kind of thing, I've got a bit of I've been everywhere. I've kind of been around, but to actually get seen overseas is really cool. So I'm
Yeah.
glad that you connected with some of those messages.
What made you want to become a coach? Did somebody say, "Hey, you're a good teacher," or out of nowhere, "I need some money"?
I wish. I wish there was money in coaching. Well, nowadays there is for sure, but no, for the longest time, man, there was no money in coaching whatsoever. It was always a case of there aren't many wrestlers in Australia, so whoever is the most experienced kind of becomes the coach. And I started in one place, the place I spoke about before, the Monster Factory. But after about 3 or 4 years, that kind of splintered off into two different promotions. And I went one way with some of the guys, and others went the other way. So this already small promotion became even smaller. And my mentor, Hartley Jackson, for a while he was a performance center coach, and now he's wrestling in Japan. He was the head coach of our company, and he used me as an assistant because I'd started traveling, I'd gone overseas, trained over there, learned a lot of lessons. So even though I was only like 4 or 5 years into wrestling, I guess I was one of the more experienced heads, and I had at least been around a bit and learned different things. So yeah, man, I was like, 19 and coaching just out of necessity because there was no one else. And then I enjoyed that. I wouldn't say I put a lot of effort into it, not like now. Nowadays I treat coaching like it's a job. I put a lot of effort into what I do. But back then it was just you went to training and, oh yeah, you're the only guy here with a bit of experience. And I would just, what comes to my head? All right, we're going to learn this tonight, and that's it. Let's go. So that's how I got into it. From there, I actually became a school teacher. So that's my 9 to 5, or that's my 8 to 4.
8 to 4.
Yeah, I'm a school teacher, physical education. So I've been doing that for almost 10 years now, and
yeah.
of course, yeah. But that came from pro wrestling. I'd been training people for a few years, and I thought, I enjoy coaching. It's rewarding. I like it. I think I'm pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Let's make some money.
Exactly. All right, man. Well, I don't want to hold you up. I know it's night there and all that stuff. And yeah, you got school. I think. Wait, what's the school?
I do have school.
Yeah. Is school system different there than it is here? I'm pretty sure. I mean, September is the start of the school year for us.
Oh yeah. Actually, no, very different. We have, because obviously we're Southern Hemisphere, so Christmas time is the peak of summer for us. That's really hot. So we don't have like a summer break or anything like that. We have 6 weeks break over that Christmas New Year's period. So like half of December, all of January is school holidays.
Yeah.
And then we have 3 sets of 2 weeks break throughout the year. So every 10 weeks, we get another 2 weeks break. So 12 weeks in total, which is another really cool thing about teaching. I get 12 weeks off per year.
It's great. It's great.
Most careers, it's like for an Australian working in any average job, you're looking at 4 weeks of holidays a year, vacation. But I get 12, so I'm pretty happy with that.
So I got a question since you're from Australia. I actually got 2 questions since you're from Australia. Does the water go left side? Does it rotate left side, or does it go right side?
I think it does go the other way. I think it does.
Really? That's great.
Yeah.
You gotta film that. You gotta film that and post it. And like, hey guys.
It's funny.
I bet you.
It's funny though.
If you do that, you'll go viral. I promise you.
Yeah. The one thing I noticed, I used to go to the US a lot.
Yeah.
The one thing I noticed was the your toilets over there are so different to ours. Like they're the same, but like they get clogged up so easily that they don't flush well. The drainage system is so bad compared to here.
It's either that or
like,
your
I mean,
shits are pretty huge, bro. Like
that's probably part of it. I was gonna say, to be fair, I was always in a wrestler house full of like 6 or 7 other wrestlers. So maybe that has part of it.
Yeah.
But I just noticed anytime we went to America, we had to keep like plugging the toilet like every time. That's just one thing I noticed more than the drainage, the spinny system.
All right, so last question.
That's more us. That's more us than you.
Last question, since you're also from Australia, is it true that you guys so I see the memes of like never go to Australia because of the spiders, the fucking poisonous snakes, you're gonna get an alligator in your toilet. Like, do you live in that area where is this all these like creatures coming at you? Like they say that always look in your car door because you might get stung by a black widow or something like.
No, not at all. Not at all. No, there's like I know those things exist and they're real. I've never seen them before.
Okay.
Like we have a lot of bugs, but it's no different to anywhere else in the world. Yeah, no, not really. Like I think there's a lot of snakes here, but you have to kind of go a little bit more like, into the bush or into the hills, like away from civilization. I've still never seen a snake in real life, so it can't be that bad.
I trust you.
We have a lot of sharks here though, a lot of sharks.
Sharks?
But
like
yeah, a lot of great white sharks.
What?
They
Do you live near a beach? Like
yeah. We all live like every city in Australia is on the coast, so I live 2 minutes from the beach. So
do you ever saw
but
a white?
No,
Okay.
no, and there's not that many shark attacks, and they have shark nets out there protecting us. Like it's really not that bad. But so where we are, we're kind of like we're on the west coast.
Okay.
But a lot of the main cities are more to the south of Australia. When you go north, that's like all the tropical regions.
Okay.
And that's like most of the year you can't swim in the water because there's like crocodiles and there's jellyfish that kill you within minutes and all this stuff. So the couple of times where I went to visit, on vacation or whatever, I stayed well clear of the water, like just eyes in the back of your head. But no, we're pretty safe over here in Perth.
That's good. That's good. Well, that's funny because when I found out I had an uncle that lived in Australia, and I'm like, there's a Filipino guy in Australia? What?
We have a huge Filipino community here.
Oh man.
Huge.
I didn't know. So I'm like, what? Like normally all my family's in the Philippines, Texas, Jersey, right? So I'm just like, then I found out I have a relative in Australia. I'm like, that's weird, But then he talked to me and everything. I'm like, oh, all right. And I asked him the same question as you do. Does the toilet go this way? But yeah, man. It was great talking to you. I would love to have you on some other time. I saw a post recently from you that you will start reviewing matches. So you know what?
Yeah. I've been doing that for a long time already. I just there was a bit of a change in the pricing structure, so I reposted it. But I've been doing match reviews for a long time.
So I got a question for you since you're reviewing matches. What makes a 5-star match to end this off for you? In your eyes, what makes a 5-star match?
Sure. I think first and foremost is the crowd reaction. I don't care how good the action is in the ring. If you can't get the crowd emotionally invested in what you're doing, it's not a 5-star match. I don't care what you do. So for me, the crowd has to be rocking. That's got to be good. The story that's being told in the ring has to be really well done, has to be very consistent from start to finish. It can't feel disjointed, like the guys have kind of forgotten to to tell the story halfway through, or they've switched off. It's got to be
Yeah.
start to finish, and obviously the technique has to be flawless. So those would be the three things for me. Um,
All
and
right.
obviously, you know, everyone has their own taste. Everyone likes what they like in wrestling,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe if you can stick to those three things, then it shouldn't matter which style you like. It shouldn't matter which promotion you like, which wrestlers you like. If someone can do all those three things perfectly,
Uh-huh.
every wrestling fan should be able to recognize how good that match is, how well done it is.
All right. Cool. Well, I want to share your content, so plug in your stuff, good sir.
Cool, man. So you can go to worldbeaterwrestling.com. My nickname, my moniker is the World Beater. So through my website, currently it links to my YouTube channel. I have over 200 videos, all free, tutorials on wrestling, breakdowns of moves, technique, advice, how to get in shape for pro wrestling. So check that out soon. Worldbeaterwrestling.com is going to be a full online community where anyone from around the world can log in and basically learn how to wrestle and progress and advance themselves. Doesn't matter where you live. So that's coming in the next few months. In terms of my social media, I put a lot of stuff all over my social media, particularly Instagram. DSlats is my Instagram handle, DSLATS. And you can also find me as Damian Slater on Facebook and Twitter.
Oh, you got a Facebook. That's cool. I,
Awesome.
Facebook is great, man. But I love IG
Facebook's
more.
great,
Yeah,
but the algorithm sucks. So my
it's
stuff doesn't
horrible.
get spread around very well.
It's horrible. Like IG,
Yeah.
you know what? You should get a TikTok, bro. All the stuff that you're doing on
I
IG.
have one.
Yeah,
I do. I just don't use it.
yeah, yeah. If you love IG, you're gonna enjoy TikTok
Yeah.
more because they're all about
Yeah.
video friendly. Like so. Yeah.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. The problem is too many of my students are on TikTok, so I try to steer clear.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that
Yeah.
is true. All right, man. Well, I would love to have you on next time. This is great. I love learning. That's the one thing I really enjoy, and I'm trying to get the CAW community up there. So you being part of this and all that stuff, especially the EFED community, CAW, HLR side of things, like is a good way to help wrestlers know that hey, there's another option and gotta check it out. It's fun. So yeah,
Fantastic, man. That's it. We all love the same thing. So
exactly.
awesome.
We all love wrestling. That's all it is, man. All right, man. Appreciate you. You take care, okay?
Thank you.
All right. Cool. This is
Awesome, man.
yeah, man.